A video titled Describing Natural Features. This will be the first in a series of short videos that will help master Paper 2 of the IGCSE 0460 course. So this one is possibly the hardest set of questions and the one candidates lose most of their marks on. So hopefully by the end of this session you will be able to master the skills needed to answer these questions that ask to describe either the physical or natural features as well as the human features of an area or landscape. So what topics will likely be asked? We'll start with the physical or natural topics, being able to describe rivers and their valleys. The second one, drainage patterns. The third, relief. And the last one, potentially an area of coastline. As for human, you may be asked to describe the human features of a river, being able to describe the settlement distribution. Again, you can use the same question also, the same tips, for housing and vegetation types in terms of distribution. And last but not least, being able to describe the site of a settlement and explaining, however, the growth factors we will also look at. So starting with the river and its valley, here's a previous past paper question. Look at the main river, Nodsdale Water, which flows in the west of the map extract. Describe the physical features of the river and its valley. So starting with rivers, being able to describe river characteristics. If you get this type of question, what are some of the pointers we want to kind of look for, certainly on the map? So the first thing to consider is what's the overall direction of flow. The second one, what's its length? This can be easily calculated by using the scale provided on the OS map. The third aspect, its width. Also its gradient, so this is the gradient of the channel here. So again, is it steep or gentle? You can tell this by analysing how far or how close the contour lines are from each other. The relief, so as well as being able to calculate the gradient from contour lines in terms of how far they are apart, you can also see the relief through contour lines. Usually this would be displayed as a spot height with a number or the number of the contour lines. It would be written on the contour lines itself. Again, what's the shape of the river? Does it meander or is it a straight pattern? Usually if it's in the upper course of a river, you would have tributaries and confluences compared to the lower course, where you would likely to see more depositional features such as oxbow lakes, deltas, certainly estuaries as well. And if it's in the upper course, erosional features such as waterfalls, for example, would be easily identifiable. So just remember these different aspects in terms of rivers. Well, the question also asks for valleys. So again, what features are we looking for when describing a valley? The first thing to consider is its shape. Is it a V-shaped, for example? Is it steep-sided? Usually if there's waterfalls, there would likely to be gorges too. The valley floor, is it narrow or wide? As well as its depth, deep or shallow? Are there any interlocking spurs, for example? Also on your map, you have a key with the different types of vegetation. So using the key again to identify what are the predominant types of vegetation here. Similarly, is there any heath or rough grassland areas? If it's in the lower course of a river, you're likely to see floodplains. Does the valley itself meander? Any outcrops, scree, cliffs, vertical faces? And similarly, are there any streams running down the side of the valley? So again, these are the different aspects. And we're just going to put this together in tackling the question. Okay, so here I've zoomed in on the map extract. The question I'll repeat again. So if you do want to tackle this, you can just pause the video and we'll go through the answers shortly. So the question, look at the main river, Nodsdale Water, which flows in the west of the map extract. Describe the physical natural features of the valley and the river. So before I show you the answers, I've included this. This is what you should really be including just to boost the quality of your answer, and you may be credited with the detail. Okay, so I've put all in the detail. Here's 4 different aspects to, again, improve the quality of your written answers. So of course, use grid references. You can use 6 figures, but I recommend also using 4-figure grid references. So for example, you have vegetation type here. You would use a 4-figure grid reference of this box. Again, this would be the little, this would be the bottom left corner in order to ascertain the grid reference for this square. Compass directions. Again, you should always draw this before you start your paper. So north, east, south, west, of course. Again, if you're calculating the length of a river or a road, for example, you have a scale and a blank piece of paper as well. So you should all know how to calculate the length of a river or road, for example. And the names of places as referencing points. So there's places such as South Whitleyburn here. So using these again to reference certain aspects of a river. Okay, so here's what I've written. So the river generally flows in a southwest direction. As it flows, the river meanders, particularly in grid square. And again, you can provide the 4-figure grid reference here. So you could use this one as a good example. You can see the river meandering a lot. As the river flows, its gradient changes from a steep gradient near Outer Woods Reservoir to a more gentle gradient through the settlement of South Whitleyburn. Also, the width of the river changes because as the river heads downstream, it becomes narrower. Also, along the river, there are waterfalls such as, and you can provide a 6-figure reference for this one, such as here. Also, there are many tributaries joining the river, particularly to the northwest of the river. You can see here. As for the valley, it is V-shaped with a narrow floor. Particularly upstream, the gradient of the valley is extremely steep. The steepest side of the valley can be found to the east of the river. The valley side to the west of the river also is forested with coniferous trees and non-coniferous trees. Other vegetation exists in the valley, such as bracken and rough grassland. The valley is deep in parts, such as in grid square. Again, you can provide the 4-figure grid reference where it's particularly deep, as well as gorges present too. Again, here's the mark scheme. So if you want to pause the video and write this, copy the mark scheme down, feel free. Okay, moving on to the second type of physical question you may be asked. Describe the drainage pattern east of Easting 21 shown on the map extract. So when we talk about drainage patterns, what it's referring to here is the pattern formed by the streams, rivers and lakes in a particular drainage basin. So the first thing to consider is the overall pattern, overall drainage pattern. There are really 3 you need to consider here that's likely to come up in the exam. The first one, dendritic, the second one, radial, and the third one, parallel, or you could also use the term linear here, going in straight lines. So, some other aspects to consider. What are the main rivers? You have the names of these rivers, so again, use these as referencing points. Similarly to the rivers we've looked at previously, what's the overall direction of flow? And of course, this is vitally important. If it's talking about a drainage pattern or a drainage basin or system, you need to know or see where the river drains. This is usually, or this will be, into a larger body of water. Most likely a reservoir, or it could be into the sea or ocean here. The density of surface drainage. If lots of tributaries, for example, then our confluences, then you could say the density is high. Again, the width of the different rivers, you're likely to see more than one river or tributaries. Of course, the width is going to change, and it's going to be variable, isn't it? Similar with the gradient as well. Certainly, if there's lots of tributaries, then the gradient will be steeper compared to larger Rivers, maybe the gradient is more gentle as you certainly go downstream. Again, I've put here, I'm comparing the gradient of larger rivers versus smaller ones, as well as the width as well. The relief as well, so the height, again, using the contour lines to identify this. Also, any erosional features, can you see any waterfalls? Vice versa, if it's in the middle and lower courses, are there any depositional features, such as slip-off slopes, sandbars, spits, deltas? And the course as well, are there any meandering rivers or straight? Again, likely in your exam they will provide you with a drainage basin where the rivers are likely to be meandering here. So again, here's some of the aspects you need to consider when describing the drainage pattern. Of course, any other features. You may see some bogs as well as lagoons within the map extract. Okay, so here's the overall extract. The question was describing the drainage pattern east of Easting 21. So of course this is west. Everything east from this vertical line here. So I've zoomed in on here. So as suggested earlier, you need to firstly identify what's the overall drainage pattern. So I've gotten the patterns here again. So you can clearly see there are radial patterns, certainly out of Knockdon Reservoir here, Knockenden Reservoir, as well as dendritic, I would suggest as well. You can clearly see up here, it follows a dendritic pattern north of Knockenden Reservoir. So again, that's how you would approach this question in the first sentence. You would describe its overall pattern. Similarly, I've included all in the details box. Again, we should be using this for all the describing types of questions, using these to make your answer more specific. So again, if you want to pause the video and tackle the question before I show the answers, feel free. Alright, so what have I written? The overall pattern of this drainage system is radial and dendritic. There are many small and narrow rivers, as well as tributaries that feed into larger rivers, such as Calf Water, therefore creating lots of confluences. Again, confluences is where two rivers meet. So most of the rivers drain into the mouth of reservoirs, such as Knockenden Reservoir. Again, you could provide the grid reference for this box here. This reservoir has gentle gradients compared to the steeper gradients of the smaller streams and tributaries. However, in the north of the extract, rivers are draining to the west. You can see here, they're going in this direction. Larger streams also flow out of this reservoir too, specifically referring to Knockenden Reservoir. You can see larger rivers are draining from this. The extract also contains lots of waterfalls too, such as in grid square. Again, you can provide a 4-figure grid reference for where there's lots of waterfalls. There are also bogs present, you can see here, such as Cauldron Bog, I should say. Again, here's the mark scheme, so if you want to copy this down, you can pause the video. Okay, moving on to the relief. So describe the relief of the land to the north of the main roads, the A736 on the map extract. So again, what characteristics do we look for when describing the relief? The main relief features, usually it would be either a glaciated upland area, coastal plain, or an escarpment. Of course, the gradient, steep or gentle, does it vary at all? What's the altitude or the relief? Again, finding the range, so we're looking for the lowest to the highest points here. And where does it change on the map? So using compass directions and again referencing points of roads, hills, names of settlements, for example. Relief features, valleys, spurs, ridges, plateaus. And the aspect, which direction are the slopes facing? Are there any valleys? Are these valleys large or small? So for this, you do need to have some understanding of contour patterns and landforms. So a hill or a circular knoll, you can clearly see follow like a circular pattern here, rising from a low height to a higher elevation here. So this is showing a ridge, a plateau, a spur, a saddle, and a valley here. Again, usually valleys would have a stream or river running through the middle of this. So going back to the question, describe the relief of the land to the north of the main road on the map extract. So here's the main road here, the A736. So we're describing the relief to the north of this road. You can clearly see this area. So again, all in the detail. I'm not going to go over this. I've been over it twice, so I'm just going to leave it for your reference. So again, if you want to tackle this question, you can pause the video. So the answer I've written, this area forms part of an escarpment with steep slopes, such as in grid square. Providing the grid square, you can clearly see here the steeps are particularly, the slopes are particularly steep, also here. The highest point is 259 Corkindale Law. You have the trig point here, or the spot height. And its lowest point ranges from 85 to 110 meters. You can see just in the corner of the extract here. As you head north from the road, the gradient becomes gentler with small valleys. The steepest areas or cliffs are north of Loch Lebo here. The slopes face southeast, and north of these slopes there are circular hills such as Corkindale Law. Again, here's the mark scheme, so if you want to pause the video, write these down, that's fine. Okay, just to show you what an escarpment is, I've actually found a picture of Loch Lebo and the escarpment. So just to give you some contextual representation here, you can see the main road, the A736, runs here. And to the left of the road you have the railway here. This is Loch Lebo, and you can clearly see the vegetation, and where the gradient is particularly steep you can see this here, this escarpment. So an escarpment is essentially a long steep slope. Okay, and you can clearly see that in both the OS map as well as the picture. Just to give you some reference. Alright, moving on to the last part of the natural or physical section, describing the physical features of the coastline shown on the map extract. So coastline, what we're looking for here. Firstly, is there a mouth of a river? Again, sorry, I've spelt slopes wrong. We're talking about the gradient, so flat or gentle slopes, or is there a cliff with a vertical face? Are there any beaches, sand or shingle, the predominant material, or is it a rocky beach? If there's a bay, well, there's likely to be headlands. Are there any present? So like rivers, of course, coastlines you've learnt in your geography course so far, there are landforms associated with coasts, such as wave-cut platforms, stacks, stumps, arches, crags, or any rocky offshore outcrops. So you've been able to identify these on the map. You can see in the image here, there's some stacks, for example, and stumps. Any pools, lagoons, or lakes? If there's a beach, again, providing the relief of this beach, is it flat or raised? Is there a natural harbour? Any eroded material, such as scree or boulders? Again, if you want to pause the video and tackle the question, you can before I reveal the answer. So here's the coastline, describing the physical features of the coastline. Should be an easy 5 marks, I think, this one. So what have I written? Well, firstly, the coastline contains sandy beaches such as South Beach. Furthermore, there is a bay, South Bay, and headland. Again, you can provide the grid reference of the headland here. Also, to the east of the coastline, there is the mouth of a river. You can see here. As for the gradient, the coastline is flat with gentle slopes with sand dunes on the east shore. You can see here, dunes if you're unsure on how to identify any sand dunes, it's an easy mark to gain. There are also rocky outcrops and a wave-cut platform to the north of the coastline. Here there are small rocky islands or likely stacks, and stumps too in grid square blank 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 blank. Here you can see the term. There is also a natural harbour. So here's the mark scheme. Just remember you need to include river mouth and natural harbour in order to get the marks. Harbour wouldn't be suffice, unfortunately. So if you want to pause again and write these down, feel free, before I move on to the human features this time. So the question, describe the human and physical features. Again, we've looked at the physical features of the River Garnock, which flows in the west of the map extract. So specifically human features. The second part of the question, they had physical features, but we're just focusing on human for now, because we've already looked at the physical. So, describe the human and physical features of the River Garnock, which flows in the west of the map extract. So, physical features, the easiest thing is just plot or use your finger to follow the River Garnock and see how have humans influenced the river in any way, shape or form. Well, the first thing you can see here is a dock or jetty or quay, for example. Moving on, FB, using your key, you'll identify a footbridge if you use the key correctly. Moving on, here, a bridge, so not only for pedestrians, for other vehicles as well, or for vehicles, should I say. Alright, moving on, you can see a weir, and where there is a weir, you can see river straightening as well. The river has been straightened by humans. So on the extract there is a dock or quay you could use, or jetty. Also a footbridge is present, as well as bridges for vehicles too. Moreover, to the north of the extract there are weirs, and the river channel has been straightened. Alright, moving on to settlement. So the first set of questions with regards to settlement is being able to describe the distribution of settlements to the west of the A760 main road. So when we're talking about settlement and distributions, the first thing to consider is our settlement patterns. So again, you've learnt these patterns before. Three major patterns: dispersed, linear, nucleated. So dispersed, you can clearly see settlements are far apart. Most likely these will be farms. Linear, so do they follow a line essentially, usually a road, or it could be a river, or are they nucleated around a central node or bridging points, for example. Again, these are more densely populated compared to sparsely populated areas, so you could use that in your answer. So again, use the same techniques. You may be asked to describe the distribution of housing. I know that's also human, but vegetation obviously is more natural, but you can use the same techniques in tackling these types of questions. So, how to describe the distribution of settlements or housing and vegetation. Like all that's gone before, the relief, again using the contour lines to identify the height. Again, not just the height of one area, we're looking for the range, again lowest to highest. What we've looked at just previously, settlement pattern, nucleated, dispersed or linear, and of course settlement types, hamlets, towns, villages. Any major settlements, so using names as well as areas with no settlements. Use the scale as well. How far apart are these largest settlements? You're most likely to see settlements that will be built along roads. Okay, it is very likely that will be shown. So if you do see any of these and they are built along roads, think about again using the scale. How far away from the roads are there? What direction do the roads going, and what type of roads? Again, using the key. So we're all about being specific here. Valley sides or floor, most likely if it's a large nucleated settlement like this one, it's very rarely they're going to be built in upland areas. Usually they will be built on the valley floor. whereas dispersed settlements more than likely would be built on the valley sides here. Are they clustered or are they uneven? Again, more focusing on nucleated as well as dispersed settlements for uneven distribution. Density, again, I've looked at this, more nucleated, more dispersed. You do get marks for suggesting this. And farms or isolated dwellings. I'm looking for these names. They are provided on the OS map. So again, this is what we're looking for when we're describing the distribution. Remember the term distribution of a settlement. We'll look at the site later, the site of a settlement. Okay, so again, if you want to pause the video and tackle this question, feel free. The question: describe the distribution of the settlement to the west of the A760 main road. So you have the main road here, and we're looking to the west. So here, this is to the north. So you wouldn't talk about this settlement here. We're talking specifically to the west. So the settlements to the west of the A760 are largely dispersed settlements, which are sparsely populated with various hamlets and villages such as West Hills. Moreover, there are farms present such as Jeffrey Stock Farm. The settlements are located on higher land, over 50 meters, however the slopes are gentle. Most of the settlements are located along roads. You can see here, for example. Specifically roads that are generally less than 4 meters. There are no settlements along Dipple Burn. See here, no settlements. Okay, describing the site of the settlement of Beath. That's the question. So what to write when we're describing the site of settlement? Again, relief, built on high or low land. We should know this by now. It's on all the previous questions. Where relief comes gradient, okay, built on on gentle or steep slopes. Again, does the gradient vary? Does the relief vary? Aspect. So which direction does the settlement face? Are they built on the valley's floor or sides? Are there any natural features, floodplains, rivers, lakes, locks? Conversely, there could be reservoirs, for instance, or dams. So any human features do look for as well as roads, bridging points, etc. Okay, so this is what to consider when we're talking about the site of settlements. You can pause the video, tackle the question. Okay, describe the site of settlement at Beath. Here's Beath. The settlement of Beath is built on gentle slopes. You can see, the contour lines are clearly far apart. And on higher land at a height of between 50 and 110 meters. Beath is near burns such as Bath Burn here, and is around 1 kilometre away from Kilburney Loch. Well, you could say overlooks the loch. We know this because the loch is built on a height of 40, so probably 30 to 35 meters, or I suppose maybe the gradient doesn't change at all. And obviously Beath, if you look closely at Beath, the contour lines are clearly higher. See 110, or I can see 100 here, so it's on a higher land, so it's overlooking the loch. Leith is also at the bridging point, you can see here, of various roads, and is facing, you can clearly see, looking at the contour lines, it's facing in a northwest direction. Okay, so here's the mark scheme. Again, copy this down if you want to. So we just remember, we shouldn't be bullet pointing. We should be writing this up as continuous text. Okay, shouldn't be bullet pointing here. That's for all the questions as well. Okay, so moving on, the previous questions. I know the title of this session is describing, but I'm just adding or tagging this onto the end. This is a suggest type question. So a little different. But again, I'll show you some approaches on how to tackle this question. So firstly, find the settlement of Howard in the east of the map extract. Using map evidence suggests reasons for the growth of the settlement. So we're looking for settlement site factors, i.e. why has a settlement grown? So I've highlighted here for this type of question, it's not simply describing, but we are suggesting, i.e. explaining or giving reasons why a settlement has grown. And the easiest thing to do is just personalize this. Think back to your own settlements. Certainly if you live in a large city, or even a small city or a large town. Think, how has it grown from a self-sufficient, probably farming community to the size it is now? What are some of the factors? So this may overlap with obviously the site of the settlement, which we've looked at earlier, but we're now given reasons. So here's some factors to consider. Gradient, steep or gentle slopes. Of course, if it's built on gentle slopes, it's easier to expand the settlement compared to steeper slopes. Are there any signs of it being a defensive site, such as castle remains? Bridging points? Shelter from valleys, again, what's the usefulness for this? Any lines of communication? When we talk about lines of communication, specifically we mean railway, rivers, roads. Again, thinking back to why are these beneficial? Water supplies should be fairly obvious as to the benefits of being close to a water supply here, certainly for aspects such as irrigation or just simply drinking water, for instance. Fertile land, floodplains, certainly if it's close to a river, there's likely to be fertile lands, and you may be able to identify floodplains. Well, of course, what's the advantage of any forested areas? Think about the use of expanding communities through building material, wood, for example. Okay, so just note these down if you are unsure, and use for future revision. Question, find the settlement of Howard in the east of the map extract. Using map evidence suggests reasons for the growth of the settlement. So I've just zoomed in on Howard here. So again, if you want to tackle the question, pause the video now. So I've not written an answer for this one, but I'll show you the mark scheme. So just remember, just describing the site isn't enough. We need to explain and give reasons. So obviously gentle slope. The fact it's gentle slope, it's easier to build settlements and expand communities, for example. So any of these regions, railway station, for example, this is useful for traveling, transporting goods, for example, commuting. Similarly, if you think of railways, it's close to a river here, Black Cart Water. Again, why a river is useful? Well, for travel, transport, goods, as well as tourism, fishing, water source, water supply. Any of these would be credited here. Okay, so you can read the others as well. Okay, that's the end of the video. Hope you found this session useful